Tonight on Wings, take off with the Discovery Channel in the General Dynamics F-111. The first production aircraft to employ a variable swing wing, the F-111 specialty is penetrating heavily defended airspace. Known for its durability and versatility, the F-111 is one of the most effective weapons in the U.S. inventory. A long-range all-weather fighter bomber, the F-111 proved its worth in the 1986 Libyan air raid and more recently in the Persian Gulf. Tonight, soar high in the F-111 on Wings. This is the F-111, a fighter bomber that has seen action in Vietnam and in the Persian Gulf. Though the design is more than 30 years old, in some ways the plane is only now revealing its tremendous capabilities. A wide range of technological innovations have made the F-111 faster and deadlier than ever before. It has few rivals in its class. In 1958, the Tactical Air Command, or TAC, the Air Force division responsible for ground attack and interdiction, flew F-105 Thunder Chiefs. The Thunder Chief was notorious for its mechanical problems and lack of maneuverability. The F-105 was built expressly for long-range strike missions. It could carry nuclear bombs at high speeds to distant targets. The plane was not built for conventional air war, but in Vietnam, the F-105 was the best plane TAC had on hand for air combat, and the war highlighted the plane's flaws. The mission requirements of Vietnam, plus the fuel-guzzling F-105's limited range, necessitated flying at low levels. This made the plane vulnerable to guided missiles. The Thunder Chief was restricted to daytime bombing and often needed fighter escort. It also required long, conventional runways. TAC knew from the start that new technology would quickly make the F-105 obsolete. Even as the 105 entered service, TAC was working on its replacement, the TFX project. The TFX fighter bomber would incorporate new materials, microcircuit technology, and innovative engineering concepts, including solid-state electronics that would give the plane fantastic avionics capabilities. Turbofan engines utilizing afterburners for extra power. And most exciting of all, a variable swing wing that would greatly enhance the heavy plane's maneuverability. At the same time, the U.S. Navy was developing its own brand new high-tech aircraft for the fleet defense mission to succeed the F-4 Phantom. Although the F-4 was eventually used by both services, historically, the Navy and the Air Force developed their aircraft separately. Each service had very different needs. But in 1961, newly appointed Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara announced it was time for a change. McNamara, a former vice president of the Ford Motor Company, arrived at the Pentagon determined to dispose of bureaucratic duplication and waste. The huge price tags of separately developed aircraft seemed a good place to start cutting. McNamara insisted on a policy of standardization. He told the service chiefs that he wanted one basic aircraft design, suitable for use by both the Air Force and the Navy. In January of 1962, after several competitions, the Pentagon reduced the field to two possible alternatives. Boeing's 818 model, while favored by both services, did not have enough shared design elements. The other design was a joint venture from General Dynamics and the Grumman Corporation. This design offered a very high level of common parts for both services. The only major components to differ were the landing gear, the wing length, and the nose. These are mock-ups of the two different nose designs. The Navy B design and the Air Force A model. McNamara was impressed. In November of 1962, an order was placed for 18 Air Force and 5 Navy planes. The aircraft was now designated the F-111. The planes were built at the Fort Worth plant of General Dynamics Convair Division. The first pre-production model was officially rolled out 16 days ahead of schedule. "25 months after the contract was signed, the first F-111, an Air Force A model, took to the air. The twin-seat F-111's unique features included a crew capsule that could be jettisoned as a complete unit clear of the main fuselage by the use of rockets. Ejection could be accomplished at any speed, at any altitude, or even below water. After it had landed or surfaced, the capsule could act as a survival shelter. The F-111 was also the first aircraft to go into full production utilizing afterburning turbofan engines. The TF-30 engine was economical and gave the plane great range. The afterburners were available for quick takeoff and extra speed. Still more range was built into the General Dynamics design by utilizing every possible area available for fuel storage. Even without external wing tanks, the plane had a range of over 2,500 nautical miles. With in-flight refueling or external fuel tanks, the F-111 could go anywhere, anytime. When no external fuel was carried, all of the wing points were free to lift an enormous array of weaponry. And of course, the plane could carry ordnance in its internal bomb bay. F-111s can carry almost any weapon in the Air Force arsenal, from the M61 Vulcan cannon to a free-falling nuclear bomb. The F-111 can drop foil as an electronic countermeasure, and flares can be discharged to confuse heat-seeking missiles. One of the original requirements of the TFX project was that the design should allow for landing on short, makeshift runways. General Dynamics met the challenge by inventing high-flotation, variable terrain landing gear. Another important F-111 feature that was brand new was terrain-following radar. This system allows pilots to select an operating height above ground of as little as 200 feet. When the control is set, the aircraft can fly at over 600 miles an hour by its forward terrain scanning radar, adjusting its height automatically. A manual mode allows pilots to use the radar-gathered information reproduced on a cockpit instrument display. Thus, it is possible for the F-111 to fly at night, in all weather, and still remain low enough to avoid radar detection.
The reason why I love flying the F-111 is because of the ground attack mode that it does. It flies low level at high speeds, any weather, day or night. It has the capability in the systems to do that, anywhere from 200 feet to 1,000 feet. I do not necessarily have to be flying the jet at that time because of the automatic systems. I'm enclosed in a capsule that protects me from the environment in case we have to leave the aircraft or eject, and that's an advantage that I like.
The F-111 requires more systems knowledge than most because the mission is longer, so that if something does go wrong, it takes more time to recover the airplane because you're at a greater distance. And it takes someone that stays on top of it. As you can imagine, operating 200, 300, 400 feet above the ground in a snowstorm at night going through the mountains, you have to be ready for just about any eventuality.
The F-111 was the first production aircraft in aviation history to employ variable swing wings. But the story of the swing wing really goes back to the Second World War. Messerschmitt produced several swing wing designs and actually built the P-1101, but it never flew. Much of this design was used in the American Bell X-5, built after the war. This model flew successfully, as did the Grumman Jaguar, although neither plane was developed. For high-speed flight, the F-111's wing could be swept back to form a delta configuration. An intermediate position was often used for economical mid-range flight. A full forward position was available for takeoff, landing, and low-speed flying. The plane could literally be redesigned in flight to suit the role it had to perform. Within the surface of the wing, flaps, slats, and fuel, together with their operating mechanisms, had to work side by side. To enable the forward slats to function, General Dynamics built a glove that also acted as an airfoil. The development of the Air Force F-111A model continued through the early 60s, and good progress was made as the new technology was put through its paces. General Dynamics and the Air Force were both pleased with the progress of their groundbreaking state-of-the-art aircraft. But Grumman, which was developing the Navy's F-111B model, had less success with its prototypes. The Navy was not happy with its new plane. Given Secretary of Defense McNamara's commitment to standardization, the Navy had little choice but to accept the B version of the F-111. But the F-111 prototypes were just too heavy for successful carrier use. Two expensive weight reduction programs failed to reduce the B model's weight by the required 20,000 pounds. Worse, the modification process had radically reduced standardization. The F-111B model was a beautiful aircraft, but it never saw service. In July of 1968, the Navy canceled the F-111B program. Instead, it went ahead with its new dedicated fleet defense fighter, Grumman's F-14 Tomcat. But the F-111A continued testing. The Air Force's Harvest Reaper program was launched to bring the F-111 to combat readiness. By early 1968, after 8 months of testing, it was decided that the F-111 should be tried out in actual combat conditions in Vietnam. Six aircraft from the 474th Tactical Fighter Wing were deployed from Nellis Air Force Base to Thailand. The F-111A flew out of the Royal Thai Air Force Base at Tak Lee. The combat testing and evaluation program was called Combat Lancer. The Thai base put the new planes within striking distance of North Vietnam. Unfortunately, the results were not all good. Within 2 weeks, 2 F-111s were lost without a trace. Less than a month later, another 111 went down. But this time, the crew ejected, and the wreckage was found and examined. The losses caused bad publicity back home and were wrongly attributed in some news reports to ground fire. After 50 missions had been flown, Operation Combat Lancer ended. The 3 remaining F-111s returned to Nellis for more testing. Afterwards, engineers discovered that the losses in Vietnam were caused by a failure in the plane's massive horizontal stabilizer. Then, in December of 1969, a Nellis-based F-111 lost a wing, resulting in a fatal crash. All F-111s were grounded. The entire program was placed under intense scrutiny. The wing problem was traced to a failure in the wing pivot box. These were hard times for General Dynamics. For the expense of developing the twin designs, considerable cost overruns, and the losses in Vietnam had caused the new fighter bomber to suffer at the hands of the press and political opponents alike. General Dynamics' defense was that the F-111 was a technological trailblazer that incorporated so many new systems that major problems would almost certainly be encountered. Both the Air Force and General Dynamics realized that despite the development problems, the F-111 was a winner, so they began improving the design. Despite the F-111's long evolution, very few external changes are noticeable. One minor one, the deletion of the moving air intake cowl and its replacement by the demand-activated inlet door, distinguishes the early A version from other models. By the time the modification program was completed, the F-111 had become a near-perfect plane. The Tactical Air Command used 4 different strike versions of the F-111. Externally, they were almost identical, but they varied considerably in cost, depending on the electronics packages used. The F-111 was also adopted by the Strategic Air Command, which needed a replacement for its older B-52s and B-58 Hustlers. SAC's new strategic bomber was dubbed the FB-111. The SAC version had a longer wing and a strengthened landing gear, but otherwise was similar to its cousins in the Tactical Air Command. Today, the F-111, once only designated a fighter, now also flies alongside B-52s as a strategic bomber.
It is still probably one of the premier bombing planes in the world, bar none. I mean, there's not many people in the world that can bomb as well as we can, that can go as far as we can, and there is no one in the world that can go as fast as we can near the ground. And we can outrun F-16s and F-15s.
I think everybody's had a scary moment at one time or another in the aircraft. The one I had that I remember occurred in Turkey when I was training low level in there. And we had a simulated attack by an F-4. We were low to the ground. We made a hard turn into the F-4, and I had some computers go out on me, which caused the aircraft to start wavering in the yaw axis. 200 feet or so and low to the ground, and the jet decides to go down. It's not a fun feeling.
In 1972, 4 years after its first test in combat, the F-111 returned to Vietnam as part of Operation Linebacker. Within 33 hours of leaving home at Nellis Air Force Base, planes were striking targets in Hanoi. This time, the results were very different. Flying alone or in pairs, the planes of TAC's 474th Fighter Wing notched up 4,000 successful sorties in 6 months.
Go ahead on into altitude, hold, and heading nav, and engage the autopilot. Working good.
Okay, we're coming up on our entry point in about 5 miles. We'll be turning right to a heading of 101.
Okay, coming right here. I'll go out and back and fly fast on the radar altimeter. Good the left channel and TF, and we'll flip the right channel over to the situation.
Okay.
Ready to start on down deck? Okay, auto TF, starting down.
Okay, I'm picking up the ground returns now.
Yeah, attitude indicator looks good. Coming on down the E-scope, ground returns coming in, and the radar altimeter clicked in at 5,000.
Roger, we should level off about 500.
Getting down to 1,000 here now, coming up 700, 600, and it's leveling off real fine, 550.
Okay, it looks good over here. I've got a ridge coming up at 5 miles on the scope, and it's dead ahead, going to 5:15.
Okay. Looks like it's about 3 miles on my E-scope now.
Right, okay, we should be passing in about 10 seconds. Okay, I'm going to target, and we're in target, and I'm picking up returns. It looks good. Crosshairs are falling good.
Got the captain's mark.
In the whole operation, only 6 aircraft were lost, giving the F-111 the highest survival ratio of any combat aircraft in the theater. The F-111 returned from Vietnam with its reputation dramatically enhanced, and criticism of the plane became muted. Later support for the wisdom of the swing-wing bomber concept came from the Soviet Union. Their Su-24 Flinzer was patterned virtually bolt for bolt on TAC's fighter bomber. Two major modifications have dramatically increased the F-111's potential. One was devised by Grumman, the company that designed the Navy's F-111 model. Grumman's EF-111 Raven project found yet another use for this versatile airframe. The Raven project takes early model F-111s, strips them down to basic components, then completely rebuilds them as electronic countermeasures platforms. In the Raven, the second crew member is an electronics weapons operator who uses sophisticated equipment to disrupt enemy radar. This provides a curtain for other attacking aircraft. The Raven can be used in 3 different ways. First, in a standoff jamming role, providing protection for other aircraft from a distance. Second, as close air support, going in at low level to give ground attack aircraft electronic cover. And finally, the Raven can fly with an attacking force deep into hostile airspace, jamming enemy radar as it goes. This system was used extensively in the Persian Gulf. Another major modification fitted to new F-111s is PaveTac, a self-contained standoff weapons delivery system. PaveTac uses an infrared TV camera coupled to a laser rangefinder designator to place guided bombs or missiles on target. PaveTac components are fitted throughout the aircraft, but its major component is the PaveTac pod, which is fitted on a rotating cradle in the bomb bay. The pod is retracted into the bay when not in use. The PaveTac pod is equipped with electro-optical sensors, infrared TV camera, and laser. Its movable pod head provides complete coverage beneath the aircraft. Targets are tracked on radar and steering corrections are made. At a distance of approximately 3 miles, the target is identified on the TV display and the infrared imagery is switched on. The video picture permits extremely accurate target tracking. The laser-guided bomb is released. The aircraft turns away to avoid the bomb blast and anti-aircraft fire. The forward-looking infrared continues to track the target and point the laser. 5 seconds before impact, the laser is activated to guide the weapon. This is an actual AGM Maverick missile launch. The missile crosshairs are placed on the target by the weapon systems operator. The missile is now locked on target. When the missile has launched, the TV video will disappear, and the PaveTac's infrared video will be used to aim, track, and determine the success of the strike.
The difficulties of flying the F-111 are primarily in the night regime or in the bad weather, and that's where we're really kind of a king of the hill in terms of abilities in the world. The 111 was designed to operate at night in bad weather at very low altitudes, and coupled with that, my job is to look at a radar set and to constantly determine our position and make sure that we're going exactly where we want to, and that our navigation and bombing system is really accurate. And that enables us to deliver the weapons, to drop the bombs on target. So it's a very difficult part of my job to constantly be evaluating the airplane's position and how good the navigation system is.
The objective of the strike was to take some airplanes that could go a long ways, carry a lot of bombs, and could precisely hit targets in any kind of weather, and take off and refuel and get there in any kind of weather, and hit targets that were very close to areas where you just wouldn't want to put bombs. So that was our mission. And as a wing, we all pitched in and contributed.
April 14th, 1986. F-111s of the 48th Tactical Fighter Wing leave RAF Lakenheath as part of the American strike mission against Libya. In response to a wave of Libyan-sponsored terrorist acts, the United States will strike 5 targets. Colonel Paul Fazakerly, a member of the 48th Fighter Wing, explains.
The Navy's very capable of doing this kind of a mission, and they could drive carriers up there, and that's why we buy aircraft carriers, project power and drop bombs. But in this particular case, we had 5 targets that we wanted to take out pretty much simultaneously. The Bonita and Benghazi were the airfields to the east of the Gulf of Sidra. And then we had 3 targets in the Tripoli area, the downtown headquarters complex, the swimming pool, which is an underwater demolition team headquarters, and a frogman-type training center, as well as a 3rd target, which was their airfield that they used to use their IL-76 transport aircraft to transport their terrorist activities, or to use to support the terrorist activities. So with 5 targets and the amount of defenses that were right around the Tripoli airport and the town itself, it became an atmosphere where using the A-6 off of a carrier, it's a little bit slower, it flies a little bit higher, it doesn't doesn't have quite the capability to hit the targets as well as the F-111. It was decided at the 11th hour that it would be better if this would be a joint mission, since we had practiced that contingency option. And so they decided to, the National Command Authority decided to go ahead with that plan as a joint option, and the 111 would be best suited for going into the area that was the most heavily defended. And it could survive much better than, and hit the targets with minimum collateral damage, where the A6 would have I think a problem in that area without an enormous amount of support. So the Air Force picked up the western targets, which were downtown Tripoli area, and the Navy picked up the two airfields to the east. And it worked very good because we had trained with the Navy. We had a Navy liaison officer in the squadron, and everyone was comfortable with the geographical separation of the two services, and yet working together, sharing a lot of mutual supports. In the 48th Wing at Lakenheath, we took off from home and flew over 14 hours. It was just about 14 hours and 10 minutes was the longest mission. And refueled 3 or 4 times, maybe even as much as 5, because we wanted to optimize our refueling on the way down to be as close to full tanks just prior to drop-off down in the Italian area. There was no problem staying awake and being alive, and on the way down, as far as the crews commented. We had a little bit of problems with airplanes because the F-111 is typically a 2.5-hour mission airplane. When you fly it for 5-6 hours and then go hit a target, who knows what's going to be left of it. So even though we had tracked the airplane's maintenance capability, it was really gutsy to take an old airplane like that far and then expect it to perform. So of the 24 airplanes that we had started with, we took 18 down there, and then of the 18, we had actually 11 go into the target area. So we did have some maintenance problems, and we fully expected to with taking an older airplane that far. And we had very, very strict rules of engagement because we didn't want to throw bombs off into the middle of the town. And this is the route that was flown. That's a picture of the attack radar. And the attack radar on an F-111, which you see there, exercise and train following radar, is the key to terrain avoidance. The paved tack pod rotates out of the bay, as you see in this picture, and the whole bay rotates in order to have your laser capability to spot a target. That's the laser picture, the forward-looking infrared radar. The airplane tosses the bombs and then turns in a 135-degree wing-over move, puts the crosshairs right on the target. Now you see the target there is the headquarters complex. To the right and off to the bottom of the screen is the tent, which was not a target. Most folks think that was the target. But the crosshairs are exactly right on the point where they should be, and the laser will be turned on at the last 8 seconds of the flight of the bomb, and the bomb will come in from above and destroy the target. In this particular case, the bombs landed right at the front door and skipped into the headquarters. There was some good BBC footage that showed it all pretty much gutted out the next day. There's a clip of ZSU-23-4 and just different kinds of artillery. There was a lot of artillery barrages and flares fired off. The flares were the thing that was most disheartening, really, from a standpoint of a guy that wants to go down and fly at night and not see anything like that. They distract you quite a bit. The other target that you're going to look at here is the airfield. The airplane is turning to the right because there was a little bit of an error in the radar offsets, but now the forward-looking radar has got it on a paved tack. The bombs are gone, and you see of the 12 bombs, 1 comes off slick, which didn't go off, and then 11, which you see circled, they're scattered out in about a 700-foot by 300-foot pattern. They would go ahead and take out the IL-76s on the ramp at the Tripoli airport. And then you see a rear view of them hitting the targets. And then after the mission, the strike force would fly out into the Gulf and be protected by the Navy in case someone was chasing you, and then right on out the same way we came in, with a couple of refuelings on the way home. What you like to see is every single airplane hit every single target with perfect footage of the film. Well, that just doesn't happen. So we had a lot of folks that had to pull off to avoid collateral damage. We had people with airplane problems, and a lot of folks have said, well, the airplane just didn't hold up, and there was problems, and it didn't do the mission as well as expected. Well, the mission was to have visible damage on 3 targets. You just saw very, very vivid visible damage on 2, and there was another tape of the 3rd which shows the swimming pool with the water draining out of it. That was the mission. And that's all that counts, is if you can show that you have destroyed or had visible damage on those 3 targets that were tied to the terrorism activities. And with those tapes, it's obvious that the mission was accomplished. And that's the overall good part, is that it was accomplished. It was accomplished by the F-111, an old aircraft. The aircraft is still accomplishing those type missions. I think that the F-111F, the one with the laser capability, will be with us for quite a while. And hopefully, my own biases are that we get those kind of capabilities tested and worked into some of our newer airplanes, especially ones that we can put on aircraft carriers and project that kind of precision power.
Robert McNamara's dream of a fighter bomber for both Air Force and Navy use never came true. But the plane he approved has, over the years, become the finest tactical and strategic bombing aircraft of its kind. And now, the versatile airframe also serves in the vital airborne electronics warfare role. The F-111's standout performance in Vietnam, Libya, Panama, and the Persian Gulf has more than vindicated its once controversial design. Its bold swing wing is now an accepted feature of high-performance aircraft, and its high-speed, terrain-following capabilities have earned it acclaim as the best low-level strike plane in the world. As technology has changed, this versatile airframe has changed with it. The F-111 has become a crucial part of American air defense.